Hey everyone, today we had a great episode for you. I talked to my trademark lawyer, Paige Hulse, and we dove into the importance of strategizing, how to protect your business, how to protect your intellectual property, the roles of AI in today's copywriting world, and how to be smart about thinking of law ahead of time and not as an afterthought after you got in trouble. So it's a great conversation. Paige is really great at making sure that she speaks and explains things in a way that all of us can understand. This was a great conversation. I'm so excited for you to listen. Let's dive in. Hey there, I am Nata Salvatori, and you're listening to the Accidental CEO podcast. This is a space for high-performing entrepreneurs who have built real success, but still find themselves tangled in the day-to-day. If you're done being the engine of your business and you're ready for scale with clarity, trust, and ease, you're in the right place. Each week, I'll bring you sharp strategies, identity-level mindset shifts, and leadership tools to help you rise above the business and lead from alignment, not exhaustion. Because scaling isn't about doing more, it's about becoming more of who you're meant to be. Subscribe now and let's build a version of your business that finally supports you. You're not just winging it, you are leading it. But let's be honest, being the CEO and the everything else can get lonely, messy, and exhausting. That's why I created the Accidental CEO Collective, a free Facebook community for creative entrepreneurs who never planned to be the boss, but damn it, here we are. Inside, I go live every week to share the real stuff. Strategies that don't require a business degree, behind-the-scenes struggles, because you're not the only one, and wins that we actually celebrate, even the tiny ones. If you're a scrappy, smart, sometimes slightly burnout founder who is ready to lead with more clarity and less chaos, this is your room. We're building a business that works for us, not one that runs us into the ground. Come join us. Let's grow, mess up, pivot, and succeed together. Just search the Accidental CEO Collective on Facebook and join our group today. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Accidental CEO podcast. I'm your host, Nata Salvatori, and today I have a very special guest with me. We've been working hard to get her on the podcast, so we finally made it. Paige Hulse is research for Juris Doctorate from the University of Tulsa and is the owner of and lead attorney of Paige Hulse Law, the founder of the Creative Law Shop and co-founder of the Special Force Support Fund and the owner of Fairway Stables. So just like me, she's a serial entrepreneur and multi-business owner and boss babe, I would say. Welcome, Paige.
That's very kind. Thank you so much. I genuinely cannot tell you how happy I am to finally be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you. And Paige is my trademark lawyer. So we're going to talk about some fun stuff when it comes to intellectual property and everything you need to be paying attention as a business owner. So you guys should definitely be paying attention and taking notes on this one. Tell us first, how did you ended up in this line of business? What is the story behind your CEO journey?
Again, thank you so much for having me here. And just as a preface before even getting started on this conversation, as a lawyer, we don't like to make promises very often, but I promise that today's conversation, even if we're talking about the law, will not be boring. I love talking about the legal side of business from the lens of being an entrepreneur because, as you said, I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I love talking about just the strategic way that we can implement this side of business. I've actually, my dirty little secret is I've never taken a business class in my life. I never, ever, ever, and I argued with my family every time they told me to. I never thought that I wanted to do anything with business, if I'm being completely honest with you. For some reason, I decided when I was, now looking back, of course, I know why, but when I was 11, I decided I wanted to be an attorney. And I was so adamant about that I enrolled in Latin as my foreign language and got started on my legal journey at 11, but never had didn't even want to do business law at first. But I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs, and I was raised with a very unique perspective of the role of a legal advocate within a business because my family, every single member of my family is an entrepreneur. And my parents in particular are in a highly litigious industry, the oil and gas industry. Lawsuits happen all the time. And I grew up always knowing that that was something that could happen and just a part of business. But I cannot tell you a single time that I remember my parents being distracted or ever sharing their worry when it came to that side of business because they had the advocates in their corner that they knew were there to, there to not only protect, but to strategize. So that obviously had an impact on me and changed how I saw the role of being a lawyer. And to make a long story short, a few years into practicing law, I just recognized the common thread between all of my clients that I enjoyed so much was that I loved working with entrepreneurs because I just identified so much with entrepreneurs themselves. And I just had that same entrepreneurial itch that once we get it, we can't get rid of it. And so started my law firm and the rest is history.
So I know that you talk a lot about, business, not only paying attention on the legal side, but also really be focused on strategy and using, things as a strategic tool when it comes to law and intellectual property. So can you elaborate a little bit more on how entrepreneurs can shift their mindset to integrate legal considerations into their business strategy a little bit more effectively?
Definitely. I'm glad you asked that because that's something that, like you said, that's one of my favorite areas of business and law to talk about. And it's something that can sound more abstract when I mean it in a very specific manner. And I was actually just right before this, just on a call with a serial entrepreneur who's starting her, I think, eighth company right now. And we were talking about just all the different trademarks, intellectual property, just the components that she needs to be thinking about. And there's always that moment where it feels like it's just the legal side never feels like the obviously the fun side of business to focus on. But I want anybody listening to this to know that it just takes one conversation to make sure, just like you've done, make sure that you've buttoned up those assets that you've created so that they're protected. And so that honestly, my goal is for you to never have to think about that again. I never want my clients to be in a position, or again, anybody that I speak to be in a position where they have to retroactively worry about the intellectual property side of their business and the like loose ends that they've left. Instead, I love to take someone like you, for example, and look at the business name that you've trademarked and look at or whatever asset you've secured the IP for and look at ways that you can monetize that. So, for example, I helped somebody this summer sell their company, and we were able to actually execute a separate transaction for their intellectual property portfolio. And that transaction for the IP portfolio was an additional 42% of the sale of the company itself. So, this was something that for that company, registering those trademarks years ago allowed them to see a huge return on their investment. I can go into much more detail on that, but I'll stop there. I want to make sure that makes sense.
So, it's usually an afterthought, thinking about law. And when it comes to really strategies, we usually think, oh, something bad happened. And now I have to go talk to a lawyer. So I really love the concept of really being strategic from the beginning and thinking about your business as intellectual property, just in general, and things that you have to protect. And, what an advantage that can be later on. So I really appreciate you sharing the thought process of teaching people to think of this from the beginning, from the get go.
Absolutely. And if I can add just one more element to that as well, again, just I want to strip to any abstractness, if that's a word, anything abstract from this conversation that I can. But even myself as a serial entrepreneur, myself this summer, I created an app. When it came down to finding the name for the app was a whole other beast of a project. Part of the reason why I chose the name that I chose is because that's a name that I'll be able to license out in the future in different areas of law or different areas that I may or may not want to license that name out. So I strategically chose a name now that I know I can see a massive return on investment in terms of the cost of actually securing that intellectual property. So I'm viewing anytime I create a company or any of those types of assets, intellectual property assets associated with those companies, it's never just, I never look at it as myopically as what I'm protecting now. It's how can I create spin-offs and or sell this in the future?
Yeah, so can you give us an example maybe so people can understand that a little bit better? So when you're choosing a name of a company or a product that you are thinking about trademarking, so what kinds of things you should be thinking about in order to potentially monetize that in the future, like you're talking about?
I'll share my very blunt and again, very personal opinion on this. Stop me if I'm not making sense or if I'm getting too heady about this. But very specifically, and just again to make this more tangible, my app that I created this summer, it's a byproduct of my shop, the Creative Law Shop, and it's called the Creative Law Foundry, or interchangeably using the term foundry. The psychology behind the what, why, and when I chose that name is first and foremost, anytime I'm choosing a business name or any type of asset like that, the first thing that I'm thinking about is how can I actually secure the trademark for it, number one. And this is kind of the boring side of the conversation, but that means that I run my own due diligence searches all the time, making sure that there aren't other names out there that could raise the likelihood of confusion with the name that I want to use. This is a very nuanced and it can be honestly a very tricky process because the United States is technically running out of trademarks right now. Even since we first started working together, it has gotten so much harder to secure a trademark. So finding a name that's clear from a likelihood of confusion standpoint is tricky, but that just means that it's more valuable once you actually can secure it. So that's number one. Number two is I'm always looking. I would never choose a business name that would be considered descriptive. Think of it from the perspective of, does the name that you've chosen describe what you are doing with the company too much? Like if I said Paige's Law Firm and tried to trademark that or something, stupid. That's a stupid example, but something like that literally describes what I do. I wouldn't be able to get a trademark because that's descriptive. And then the third component to all of that I look at is, like I said, what opportunities in the future do I have to license that out? So for example, I have a trademark behind me here for my company Fairway Stables, and the slogan for that trademark is the business of horsemanship. And I'm not going to share all of the plans I have for that company in the future, but that's a name that I would be able to, or a phrase that I would be able to license out that could be associated with curriculum, for example. If somebody actually wanted to get exclusive rights to that slogan and just pay me to be able to use that slogan on a quarterly or monthly or annual, whatever that might be, term. So there are a lot of options at play, but it all starts with getting that foundational element of making sure that you have a trademark that you actually can play with like that. And in order to do that, you have to have one that's clear and it's not too descriptive.
So for a business that's just starting to think about intellectual property, what are the first steps you recommend that they take to secure their IP?
The number one, I'm not going to be so Pollyannish to say that a startup can always immediately work with a lawyer, although that should be where some of your first dollars go, truly. That was some of the advice that my dad actually gave me. He started his company with just a few $100s to his name and literally spent that money on attorneys because of the networking and then the just advocacy element as well. But I know that that's not always an immediate option. The number one thing that I would tell any aspiring entrepreneur or just serial entrepreneur to do, just like the client I was talking to right before this, is you have to start with a due diligence search. So even if you can't pay an attorney to run one yet, you need to go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office and you need to use their search tool. I will tell you, that is just the very, very, very first step. It is not, that is not a true due diligence search, but at least use that search tool and make sure that there's not already a trademark that is the exact name that you hope to use for your business. That's a way, hopefully, if and when you do work with an attorney who runs that due diligence search, I always search on the USPTO first before I actually run the full due diligence search, just to make sure I'm not actually wasting my clients' money. Hopefully the attorney that you work with would do the same, but that's a way that you can save yourself some time before you even get started with the legal process. Always, always, always the number one. It's boring, but it's the number one thing that you need to do.
That's good. That's a good first step that I feel like at least people need to be aware of to start looking at. And I, again, as somebody who has done it twice, 100% recommend that you try to protect things. And when it comes to your business, you don't want to work so hard and build, this huge business that is now your sole income, and then out of the sudden you have to close everything because somebody else actually owns the name of your business, and you have to either start over or change everything, and you lose a lot of the traction you've already created. So
I'm fighting one of those cases right now, and they gut me. It's just one of my least favorite parts of my job. I mean, I'll fight tooth and nail, but it just breaks my heart.
let's be honest, you didn't build this business to work 80 hours a week, chasing invoices and solving problems at midnight. But now you hit a wall. You've outgrown DIY and you're spinning your wheels trying to scale and stay sane. That's where one-on-one coaching with me comes in. This is not a cookie cutter program. It's tailored, strategic support designed specifically for founders like you, the ones who built something from nothing and are now carrying all the weight. We'll get clear on what's keeping you stuck, simplify your focus, and build a plan that gets results without burning you out. If you want a second brain and no BS sounding board, and someone who can help you make better, faster, smart decisions, this is for you. Head out to accidentalceo.co/coaching. That's accidentalceo.co/coaching. And let's work together to grow your business and take your life back. So, what are some of the common mistakes that businesses make regarding IP, and how can they avoid it?
So kind of not to be too redundant with what I was talking about earlier, but make sure that as you're building your company, make sure that you're building something that you actually can own. So step number one is paving the way for yourself. And then actually step number two being put that into action and take ownership of what you're creating. So what I mean by that is, again, make sure that that name actually exists. The option to trademark it exists. So make sure there's not another name that's too similar. And descriptiveness is really something I would say the number one mistake that I see people make that is just so avoidable. And it's frustrating, especially when you found a name that you really like and the United States decides to tell you that they think it's descriptive. There are some ways around that. You can kind of, just like I was actually saying a minute ago with my slogan, Business of Horsemanship, the USPTO actually claimed that that was descriptive. And so I took kind of a backdoor route, and that's on the supplemental register for a couple years. So there's a few ways that you can work around issues like that. But if at all possible, especially if we're lucky enough to catch the listener at the ideation stage, as you're preparing to or thinking about starting a business or starting a new area of your business, that's something else that's really important to keep in mind. It can be so beneficial to actually create that separate brand identity for that other aspect of your company, and just make sure that it's not too descriptive and it's actually something that can be trademarked. So I'm happy to get into that component of mergers and acquisitions and intellectual property as well.
I want to break it down just a little bit more for people. Like, what is all included into intellectual property of a business other than the name of the business? I feel like people don't have a good idea of what that means. So let's break that down for them.
That is a great question. This is where talking about strategizing the intellectual property, I can just be off to the races, and I'm glad you caught me there. So when we're talking about intellectual property, we're talking about three different areas of law, technically. So we're talking about patents, and those cover inventions, trademarks, which is what we've primarily been talking about today, and that covers brand identifiers. So typically that's a business name, logo, or slogan. Sometimes it can actually be a color, like Tiffany blue is trademarked, or even a smell could be trademarked, but that's very rare. And then the third area of intellectual property is copyrights. So copyrights cover tangible works of authorship. So for example, if you've created a course or just anything tangible, online courses are what we most frequently copyright for our clients. You want to secure the copyright registration for that course because in the US, you cannot, I'm speaking generally here, but you cannot take action against somebody who has infringed upon your copyrighted work until you have the registration in hand. So that means that you have to think ahead before somebody actually copies you, and you have to secure that registration before the copycat finds you to copy you, if that makes sense. Those are the three areas of intellectual property. Every business inherently creates at least a trademark, and typically inherently creates copyrights as well. Patents are obviously a little bit more, well, quite a bit more rare, just because inventions should be more rare. But every business that operates does on some level have at least one component of intellectual property.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was very good. And I feel like people have a better idea now what that means when we say actually.
Good context.
Yeah, with the rise of AI in business, what are some of the legal considerations that entrepreneurs should be aware of?
This is again, I could talk about this for hours because we are at such a precipice. I don't think that the copyright laws that we have currently are actually sufficient for AI. A whole other conversation that I can get into. There's a really interesting case going on right now at the New York Times suing OpenAI and Microsoft, and basically question of what is, well, again, I don't want to get into that too much, but suing and saying that OpenAI is breaching or is infringing upon intellectual property rights. Basically, every single time ChatGPT spits something out. Cases like that are what we're tracking right now. But when it comes to AI and just how this impacts my clients, and what I'm telling all of my clients is right now, according to US, and these laws are true for most of the world as well, but speaking specifically to the US, in order to obtain intellectual property registration, you have to have a human author. Again, speaking in very, very broad terms, that means that if you're filing for a patent application, or if you're filing a copyright application or trademark application, the actual person who is designated as the creator or as the owner has to, of course, be a person. That sounds silly, but when I file a copyright registration, again, using the example of an online course, I have to be able to prove to the Copyright Office that my client owns every single element of the course. So for example, I'm working on one right now, and I have to prove that she owns every single photo that's in the course, all of the actual copy within the course, and every component that went into it. So we had to make sure that we had copyright assignments from the graphic designer, from the copywriter, et cetera, et cetera. So when you throw AI into the mix, then you run into the issue of, or the question, I should say, of AI. If you use something like ChatGPT to create the majority of, let's say, the text component of your course or the curriculum of your course, is the course actually a human creation? The real answer to that right now is, I don't know. Nobody knows. And a lot of lawyers are trying to figure that out in court right now. What I'm telling my clients is I'm just following in the footsteps of the Authors Guild and what they are recommending to their authors, which is no more than 10%. I say 5%, but no more than 10% of what you create should be created with AI. On a more cheerful note, when it comes to this, more and more entrepreneurs are relying on AI, as they should. I do as well. I literally created an AI-powered app this summer, like I was talking about. So this is not at all, it's quite the opposite. This is not anti-AI at all. Yeah, it's just a matter of make sure that you're one of the few people who's actually being strategic about it. Because the people who are being strategic about how they're using AI are the people who are creating the really valuable intellectual property that is just going to become more and more rare, and therefore more and more valuable as time goes on. What I mean by that is if you're creating something that you know that you want to register or that you want to own, make sure that you have taken enough steps to make sure that you can actually claim ownership and prove that it was human authored, which sounds odd to even say. By being able to do that, you're going to be one of the few people who can actually get that registration in place. And then again, be in a position where you can license it out, where you can sell it, etc. in the future.
How does someone prove that? How do you prove that you wrote the majority of that content, for example?
That is the question. That's and honestly, I'm not going to act like I can even answer that question. That is the question. And what's actually interesting from an entrepreneurial standpoint is people are literally trying to create AI tools that can identify how much AI exists in other creations. So it's like there's another door of opportunity there. This is where if you came to me and you had a course and we're talking about copywriting it, I'm going to generally speaking, I'm going to say, okay, we're filing that as 3 different applications. We're filing for all protection of all of the auditory, all of the visual, and then the compilation of those together, like a motion picture, for example. Or that's literally how I register a copyright for a course is as a motion picture, which sounds kind of funny. If we look at it like that, you're breaking it into automatic thirds. So if you can say that you as a photographer took all of the photographs, I'm already not worried about that. 33% of the course, et cetera, et cetera. So there are kind of some ways that we can start narrowing down or trying to put a number or a percentage next to the different components of what you're creating. But more so, just at the outset, I want people to, as you're creating something, again, whether that be like myself and you're creating an app or whatever that might be, just make sure that you're taking an extra step to make sure that whatever you've created with AI, you've put your own spin on it enough. So for example, with my app, I did use ChatGPT to help with some of the training, but then I went a few steps further and actually refined and put everything in my voice, etc. So work smarter, not harder.
It's here to stay, and we have to just learn how to, use it smartly, but not, abuse it and stay within the parameters of what is allowed. So it's going to be a fine line and a blurry line for a while, for sure.
Find a way and ask yourself these questions and find a way to use it as a springboard that does not hamstring you at the same time, because I'm seeing too many people get in a rush, and it's always good to try to be an early adopter, but you have to remember that the onus is still on you to be the creator, and that's really the point that I want to drive home.
So let's go back a little bit into the strategy portion of things. So can you maybe share a story where legal strategy really transformed a client's business?
Absolutely. So I have a client that, like we were talking about earlier, she knew at the outset of building her business that she wanted to be able to license it out, either sell it or license it. And that's every business should be built to at least be sellable. Whether or not you actually want to sell it can be a separate question. What we did, so she has a consultancy business. She created an educational component to that business as well. So she had a course, some other components like that. So the first thing that we did from a strategy perspective is we broke those into 2 separate entities, because I wanted to separate the liability out from those 2 areas of the company. We obviously secured the trademark for the consultancy side of the company and the course as well. And then I also registered the copyright for the course. Sure enough, somebody came along and wanted to license out both areas of business and just hire her as a contractor, essentially, as a consultant just for it. And I'm trying not to be too specific here, which is why I sound really vague with what I'm talking about. They wanted to license out the educational side of her company, and they wanted her to only be able to provide her consultant work within their company, essentially. So what we were able to do with that is we were able to obviously draft my proudest licensing agreement to date. She makes 6 figures a quarter, a very healthy 7 figures a year, just based on that licensing deal that she has in place with that company that she created. She was able to do that within 3 years of creating the company, which is that's a very, very fast turnaround. She literally lives she has a home in the US and she has a home abroad, and she works 10 hours a week. And it's one of those types of stories where all of a sudden being an entrepreneur just sounds so easy.
Fine, Paige. We'll schedule some more meetings to talk about my stuff. You convinced me now.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is get your trademarks in place, and then you can just drink pina coladas all day and you'll be fine.
Sounds like a great deal for me. I'm on. I mean, yeah. That's a great example of really how thinking ahead and being smart about it can really, benefit you in the future. So again, we have to spend money to make money. That's just part of owning a business. But I think even further than that is to be smart about where you put your money in the beginning. And these legal services should definitely be up front on your list of where I'm going to put my money as a new entrepreneur.
I appreciate you saying that. And take a second as well, just to use myself as an example too. This is part of why. So I've always wanted to be a lawyer, always going to be practice law. And I never wanted to be a shop owner or product owner. Like, I love advocacy. That's very different than, customers are very different than clients, right? But I created the creative law shop for a few different reasons. One, if I need, just to have some sort of, I can't even say that's passive revenue because it's not, because licensing is truly the only area of passive revenue I've ever seen anybody achieve in business. But the reason why I invested that time and money and all of that into creating the shop early on, within the first 3 months of starting my law firm, was because I wanted to be in a position where if I wanted to, I could license out those templates to specific to specific groups, whatever that could be. But my point being, I could monetize that company in several different ways. Instead of using that example, I decided to turn it into an app, and then I'll be able to have options in terms of how I want to play with the licensing structures available there as well. But that's something else. A lot of people, I want people listening to this to take a look at your business and think about what are you sitting on in terms of elements that you could actually kind of spin off into either a separate side of the company, or again, assets that you have that you could literally actualize and be in a position to sell or license and just continue to monetize the business. I heard that's what we're supposed to do.
That's awesome. Well, a lot of great information and great tips for everybody today. I liked how we really broke things down into some digestible pieces when it comes to IP and trademarking and all that. I really appreciate you joining me today to talk about all that. Tell everybody, where can they find you if they want to start investing on protecting their business?
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me and for talking about what I hope is, again, the fun side of law. It's not always about getting ourselves out of trouble. So my law firm is Paige Hulse Law, and that's just paigehulselaw.com. That's where I provide all of my one-on-one services. I work as a fractional general counsel and provide intellectual property services. And then the Creative Law Shop and the Creative Law Foundry are my contract templates, and then contract building app that I've been referencing. Through that app, the shop is actually now transferring completely into the app at the time that we're recording this. So it should happen any day now. But in that app, every contract I've ever written has been broken down. And now, instead of just coming and downloading for example, like a wedding photography contract, now you can actually build one that is completely customized to your business and or renegotiate parts of that contract. And there are about almost 1,000 triggering events behind each of those contracts. So for example, if you have a client that comes to you and wants to purchase the copyright rights from the wedding that you're shooting, you can just hit a button, and I've taken care of about 200 other considerations on the back end that would need to be drafted in. So I jokingly say that the app will replace me at some point in time. But that right now, you can find that at shopcreativelaw.com.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and sharing your knowledge. I know everybody appreciated all the great insights. Thank you guys for hanging out with us this week, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us in the world where creativity and business strategy collide. I am Nata Salvatori, thrilled to have shared this time with you. Remember, every episode is a step closer to mastering the art of being an accidental CEO. So don't miss out. Hit subscribe, drop us a sweet review, and spread the word to your creative tribe. Your next big breakthrough could be just one episode away. Join us next time for more insights, laughs, and actionable tips. Keep pushing boundaries, dreaming big, and embracing the beautiful chaos of entrepreneurship. Here's to make magic happen in your business and beyond.